Hey there. I wanted to thank Deeper Dive Learning and Cloud9 World for the opportunity to spend a little time with y'all, and especially wanted to thank everyone here that carved out some time to jump on this webinar. You know, I chose the title, You Can't Read a Book and Run from a Lion at the Same Time, because I, I haven't seen too many lions like this in a long time. You know, I talk about lions being anything that stresses us, anything that causes our heart rate and our adrenaline and our cortisol levels to spike. And boy, have there been some things right now that have caused that to happen in our time together. And we just have a really short time. I really want to focus on ourselves personally and how we're doing showing up for our kids, whether they're our own kids in the house or kids that we're working with through Zoom and other factors, because we've got to really, really be conscious of our energy levels. And when we think about the lions, I want y'all to just try to imagine the level of stress in some of these homes. You know, I think about the millions of people last night that woke up in a cold sweat trying to figure out where am I going to be able to get food for my kids tomorrow. We're talking about kids' lives that have been totally slam dunked, schedules blown apart, you know, families that are on top of each other in apartments that don't get much natural light. And so when we talk about the lions, there's a lot of lions. There's escalation of domestic violence. You know, there's men who, for the first time, have no ability to support their families and the impact of that on the whole entire family structure. So we're dealing with a lot of lions. And when we look at the hierarchy, we've got to remember that the two lowest needs on that pyramid are physiological and safety needs. And right now, there are millions of people who are living at that level right there, who are literally living moment to moment at that level right there. Physiological needs, safety needs. And so part of what we can do is to be really clear on how we show up and what we can do to help move them and take care of tier 3 and 4 of Maslow, which is the belonging needs, the love and the esteem needs. Because look, we're hardwired to connect, and it's really, really a challenging time right now when we're not able to socialize with our colleagues that we see day in and day out in whatever profession we're in. Those social interactions of going for happy hour or meeting some friends for dinner or celebrating anniversaries and birthdays and all of that, it's thrown out the window in a way that we're used to. We're adapting, which is one of the beautiful things about human beings. We are quite resilient and have the ability to be flexible and adapt, but it's not the same. And so when we talk about that fundamental need that we have to be connected to human beings and that desire that we have to feel seen and heard and validated, that's really one of the questions I want us thinking about is, what are we doing? How can we do it better? What are some things we can implement to continue to focus on tier 3 and 4 and help kids and parents feel seen and heard and validated in this crazy time that we find ourselves? One of the first things I want to throw out is that how a child feels is going to impact their motivation and how engaged they are and their literal physical ability to take information in and store it in long-term or short-term memory. And so when we think about the lions that they're running from that they've never run from before, not being able to see their friends, not being able to see their teacher and interact on the school level or that favorite janitor or the principal or whoever it is, all of these things are causing the emotional state of our kids to be impacted. We know from neuroscience, you know, we used to think that we are thinking beings that feel, and that's not true. It's the opposite. We are feeling beings that think. And emotions truly are the fast lane of the brain. And so what we've got to be thinking about is, what's the emotional state and what can we do to impact it? One of the things is definitely increasing emotional deposits, figuring out different ways in which we can help our kids feel seen and heard and validated, and our parents. And the crazy thing is, Animals are the same way. They did a study in England and they wanted to know if cows cared about being loved on. And they separated this group of cows. And for one solid stretch of time, about 10 months, one group, they just hooked them up and milked them. The other group, they loved on them. They talked to them. They petted them, sang to them. And what you reckon happened to the milk production of those cows that got loved on? Yeah, you know, those milk productions across the board went up. That right there is a happy cow. We got to make sure our kids look that happy. Do your kids look that happy? Do your parents look that happy? Because those emotional deposits that we put in by way of compliments and smiles and all of that has a direct impact on how we feel. The second thing I want to throw out, and this is a really, really important piece of information, it's the impact that we have on an emotional level by how we show up. And we now know from neuroscience that we, as a creature, as a human, we are very, very attuned to subtle shifts in the emotions of other people. We literally have a visceral physical reaction to those changes that we see and feel in another human being. And our wiring, the mirror neurons, often match that vibration, match that level of energy that another person is experiencing from us. And this is crucial for us to understand. It is subtle shifts. And so when we're talking about how we're showing up with our own family or with our kids on Zoom and talking to our parents, we've got to make sure that we remember this piece of neuroscience, because that last sentence is really important. It makes us vulnerable to other people's negativity, anger, and depression. So we've got to continue to check ourselves and realize that how we show up on a minute-to-minute basis is going to have an impact on the environment around us. And we know from stress also that there's two parts of the brain that are drastically impacted. And one is the prefrontal cortex, one's the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, unfortunately, is the last thing to develop. And I want y'all to take a look at what all the prefrontal cortex is responsible for. When we look at that list, and then we realize, okay, the prefrontal cortex is the last thing to come online. And for females, it's going to be early 20s. And for males, it's going to be mid to late 20s. We start to realize that in the best of circumstances, kids are going to show up and make some really knuckleheaded decisions. You know, and we say, why did you do that? And kids say, I don't know. I remind parents all the time, they don't. A lot of times they have absolutely no idea why they did or said what they did, because look, impulse control, self-control, initiating appropriate behavior, making sound judgment, that's all in that part of the brain that will not even be online until their 20s. So add that to the fact that stress also inhibits these areas. We got some kids who are struggling and not able to make some really good decisions or show up in an appropriate way in a lot of circumstances. The other part of the brain is the amygdala, and the amygdala's job is to keep us safe. That's it. And when a human being feels that they are not physically or emotionally safe, the cortisol level spikes, we go into fight, flight, or freeze, and that's it. That's all we got, is dealing with that at that human level of survival. And trauma has the capacity to impact us in a different way, and humans definitely show up differently in dealing with trauma and stress. But I want you to look at that hyperarousal and hypervigilance, because for some kids and parents who are dealing with the unknown in front of them, dealing with schedules that are all whacked, parents that are in the house together and maybe not getting along so well, that brain with the amygdala fired up is going to continue to be focused on the surrounding areas, because the brain is trying to keep me safe in all of this unpredictability. So one of the things I want to stress is that we have got to figure out ways to help keep our kids calm, help them find their zen. And probably the number one thing, which I talk about with schools all the time, is creating a safe environment. So right now, it's in our home with our own family. If we're doing Zoom sessions with kids, it's that environment. I've worked with a couple of cyber academies, and it really is an intentionality when that teacher comes on the screen and how that teacher's energy is that really dictates how the flow of that class will go online. And part of what we've got to do is be remembering that we are the chief emotional officer. When I tell administrators, you're the CEO. Yes, you're the CEO. You're the leader of that school, but they're also the chief emotional officer. And we as a teacher, we as a school social worker or school counselor or whatever role we play, we all are in positions of needing to make sure that we are balancing how we're showing up in our logical brain and our emotional brain. And I love this picture because I can get really intense. I can get way in my head. And I have to remind myself often to check in and see, where's my balance? Am I balancing the social emotional side that's so important for us as human beings to thrive? Am I too much in my analytical problem solving mode and missing opportunities to connect with people and not checking my energy? So that's one thing I'm really going to ask you to do. Also, we've got to really be mindful of being more present right now. And the cool thing is, when we smile, there is something that happens in other people's brains, and those mirror neurons are stimulated. And so when someone smiles at us, it's very difficult for us not to just reflexively smile. And when we do, the person that originally smiled and the person that responded both get a dose of dopamine and oxytocin. It's a beautiful thing. And this is what research out of Berkeley came out with. And it said that aspect of the chemical release when we smile has a more powerful impact than chocolate. And I don't know about you, but I love me some chocolate. Another thing I'm going to ask you to do as a chief emotional officer is to really check your level of enthusiasm. On a study of leaders in major organizations, the number one factor with employees and how they viewed the company and the organization was the level of enthusiasm that a leader had on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of stuff we can't control out there. We absolutely can control within the four walls how we show up and how we choose to engage with other people. And so the whole concept of dopamine, I talk about all the time, slinging dopamine and being a world-class dopamine slinger, it's imperative that we do everything we can to lower that cortisol. And the beauty of dopamine is that it absolutely overrides the impact of cortisol. It improves our moods. That's why when you eat chocolate, oftentimes we feel better, because it does lighten our load and improve our moods because we just got a surge of dopamine. Some of the other things that we can do is really be mindful every day of going, you know what, I just want to sling a lot of dopamine. I just want to sling dopamine everywhere. Everybody is going to get a dose of dopamine from me, and I can control that. And so when we talk about slinging dopamine, here's just a few things that will release dopamine. And that's absolutely within our control. And that's part of building resiliency, is within the midst of trauma, it's identifying, okay, what are those things that I absolutely can control in the midst of all of this craziness going on outside of my home? And this right here, this intentionality that says, I am going to sling more dopamine, I'm going to take some absolutely intentional steps to help me and my own family and kids I'm serving or parents I'm serving, that's huge. One of the things on this list I'm going to ask you to look at is serving others. When we think about how we can engage kids, I'm going to challenge you to figure out in your own family, with your team and colleagues at school, is there a way that we can put kids in a position of service? Is there a way that we can position them to reach out and help other people? Can I get them to draw some really cool pictures and, I don't know, actually snail mail them to someone? Or can I get them to FaceTime with an older person, or can I get them to text or email or whatever with somebody that's going to lift their spirits? Putting kids in a position to experience giving to others also will help release dopamine and also helps build the capacity for more resilience. And so that's one area that I think in this time when we're out, one of the great examples, I have a friend that posts on Instagram and he walks the neighborhood every day. And there's a couple of families and their kids who write positive messages in colored chalk throughout the neighborhood. That's a perfect example of putting kids in positions to serve others. I know another family in his neighborhood colored all of the bricks that surrounded their mailbox. Those are positions of service. That's giving to others, and it helps kids really see the world differently instead of all of the unpredictability that they're facing. Another thing I want to throw out is meditation, and you can call it meditation. I joke about not saying meditation south of the Mason-Dixon line because it freaks some people out. But look, we're talking about mindfulness. We're talking about deep breathing. We're talking about the fact that research says that when we take time to mindfully breathe, when we take time to have that level of consciousness to where we're just focused on our breathing, in and out, in and out, in and out. This is a great bonding exercise with our kids. If I was doing Zoom sessions with kids, with my students, I would do this every day with them. That'd be the first thing that I would do. I would just have all of us take some really, really deep breaths together. And now I would ask everybody to tell me one thing that you're grateful for today. Us being able to focus on what we can do. This is something we can share with our kids. What a cool thing for parents and kids to start meditating together and just having those quiet moments to allow for that cortisol level to come down. So that's another thing I'd really encourage you to do with your own family, with yourself, and with your students if you're in that mode. This is another thing. Animals are great at laughing. See there? They laugh. Show teeth. Show teeth. A lot of laughing. We got to laugh more. And the importance of this is twofold. One, it releases dopamine and decreases cortisol. And two, it models for kids how to navigate tough environments. It allows for them to see us as human. It allows for them to see us in a lighthearted way that encourages them to not continue to focus so much on all the negativity and all the uncertainty and all the jarringness and all the lines they're running from. And so allowing for our check-ins as the chief emotional officer to be really clear on when's the last time I laughed really hard. And so that might be that I go and I intentionally watch sitcoms that make me laugh. I just posted yesterday, Huffington Post put out a really great article on 15 really positive, upbeat websites. I would encourage you to pull that article up, to Google some of the top sites and visit those on a daily basis to allow for you to be in a place of focusing on things that we absolutely could control, and more importantly, that our kids need to see from us. Another thing is, I've worked with a lot of administrators and educators that it's like, man, you're chronologically young, but you just seem so old because you've forgotten how to laugh. You've forgotten the power of that. And so we're in a place now more than ever that kids desperately need that from us. I mentioned serving others. And another tool I want to throw out is something called a 6-word memoir. And adults have responded to this over the years. I don't know who started this, but somebody started and asked adults to write 6 words that kind of encapsulated either a period of their life or their philosophy of life. 6 words. And here's some examples that I've seen. Married, but I ain't dead yet. Asked to quiet down, spoke louder. Who am I to say no? I still make coffee for 2. Became my mother, please shoot me. And these are adults. I'm going to show you some kids in a minute, but here's what I encourage educators to do when I'm on site doing some trainings is take this concept and make it relevant to the time period. Like, for instance, give me 6 words of how you feel going into Thanksgiving break or Christmas break or how you feel about this school year. Well, now it would be, give me 6 words on how you feel about this worldwide pandemic, or how you view your future right now with all the changes that have gone on, or how do you feel? What are 6 words that kind of encapsulate how you feel about not being able to see your friends every day, or interact in sports, or just school shutting down, or not being able to see your team. There's so many different ways that you can use this and come back to it. And what it does is it allows kids, instead of having to write a essay, they can encapsulate it in 6 words. And oftentimes kids will draw and write, which allows you to see more into what the state of mind of the child is. Here's some examples I want to show you really quickly. This is from a student. I'm a Muslim, not a terrorist. Important person, now gone, missing them. I'm not myself around my friends. Music is always in my head. And what if I did leave? Fall often, always get back up. This tool can be a really great way for kids to feel safe. It's a non-threatening exercise, but it really quickly allows you to have a snapshot of what's that child feeling about this or this or this. And so that's one tool I wanted to share with you. Another one is, and I know some of y'all have heard of Kylie Schwartz. She was a Title I teacher, needed to get to know her kids better and realized she didn't know a lot of the stuff that was going on. And so she gave them a file card and she's put, I wish my teacher knew, and asked them to fill it out. And these are some things that have come back from different teachers in different places with different ages. I wish my teacher knew that sometimes my reading log is not signed because my mom is not around a lot. I wish my teacher knew that my mom might get diagnosed with cancer this week and I've been without a home 3 different times this year alone. I wish my teacher knew that I struggle to have any confidence in myself. I wish my teacher knew that my brother is sleeping so hard that he is breathing too hard and that I cannot sleep. That's an important thing to know. That little kid isn't getting a lot of sleep because her brother's snoring. So this is just another tool that you can use. And the other thing is, I put up here, I wish my teacher or parent. And so you could have parents, I wish my parent knew. And you can have that also be another direction that you go as far as getting information. You know, my time is wrapping up. I wanted to share this quote. A lot of times when I do keynote speeches, I always make sure I include this quote because it is so relevant on our day-to-day basis, and it is even more relevant now with the unpredictability and us navigating in the dark and all the unknowns. We have been placed in a position of which we cannot control. And the only thing that we can control is how we decide to show up on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. And we're going to touch individuals. There's absolutely no doubt that every human interaction that we have is going to touch people. The question is, what is that impact going to be? And that is something we get to decide every day. And so what I'm going to ask you going forward is, number one, take good care of yourself. Challenge yourself on a daily basis to be a great chief emotional officer. Challenge yourself to focus on that balance beam of heart and head and make sure that you're really, really tapping into the social emotional side of your own life and your own being as a human being and the way you interact with others. Be a great world-class dopamine slinger and make sure that every person's day is better because they interacted with you. Anything that I can do to help serve you, I want y'all to know that you can reach out. I also want to encourage you to poke around on Cloud9 World websites. They have phenomenal resources for kids from early up until middle school. A lot of them now are free. And also I'm going to encourage you to poke around on Deeper Dive Learning. That is a platform with online courses under all kind of topic areas. And I know that the owner of Deeper Dive Learning has opened up some of these courses for free for a period of time. So please make sure that y'all jump on that as well. And if there's any other time that worked for your schedule, there's some more webinars that are coming up in April. There are the dates. Y'all feel free to share that information as well. And if there's anything that I can do for you, again, I answer emails and phone calls. We're figuring out how to do this whole cyber online stuff. And anything that I can do, please make sure that you reach out to me, post anything on my Facebook page, interact with me personally, and we'll make sure that whatever it is I can do for you, we actually will get it done. I told somebody the other day, heck, if you just want to have a Zoom session, grab a glass of wine and just cry, we can do that too. So I'm here for you. And I want to thank y'all for what y'all are doing, the resiliency and grit that you're showing in this time that we find ourselves, and continue to be that light for everyone that you interact with on a daily basis. And I will see y'all soon.